What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. On this video, I'm going to take you guys through yet another episode of the top 1000 team selection. This is going to be for Game Week 13, the upcoming game week. We're going to be taking you guys through the top 1000 template, the players with the highest ownership within the top 1000 managers currently in the rankings, and then I'll be doing my best to predict the transfers and team selection these managers will have going into Game Week 13. Always like to do this video as it gives us quite a nice reflection point on the top 1000 managers, as these managers are obviously doing quite well in the overall rankings. So it's always good to see what players they currently have, and then maybe you guys can pick some differentials. So that's something you guys are interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So firstly, before we get into the video, I want to give you guys a reminder about the Champions League and any kind of European football that will be happening this midweek. Quite high intensity games coming up. We have Chelsea versus Juventus. We also have Man City versus PSG, if memory does serve me correct, coming up tomorrow. So please just pay attention to those fixtures. And also United, I think, are not kind of certain in their specific group, so they also want to win that fixture. Also with the Liverpool assets, a lot about Firmino and Jota that we don't really know. And maybe Jota has a little bit of a knock and might not be featuring in that game, but is he actually going to be fit enough for the bench? That'll give us quite a good indication for the upcoming game weeks. But as I always say, as long as you guys are paying attention to this press conferences coming up on Thursday and Friday, you guys should be fine, and then you guys can take that news into the deadline stream coming up on Saturday evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you guys are around the world. But it is also nice to see how your players are getting along in the midweek, whether it be the Champions League, the Europa League, the Conference League, all that good stuff. Just so you see if those players maybe get a rest, or maybe they come off earlier into those Champions League games, and that should give you guys a good indication of who's going to be starting in Game Week 13. But now that we've got all the admin out the way, I'm going to be giving you guys the top 1000 template. What I'll be doing after this is predicting the transfers that I think these managers might make, and then I'll be going into the team selection for the upcoming Game Week 13 a little bit later on into the video. But in terms of the top 1000 template, but the one thing I wanted to kind of point out here is that there definitely is a very strong template being put out within the top 1000 managers. Now at the start of the season, we had some variation here. We didn't have that many high-owned players, and what that kind of was an indication that there were a couple of combinations, a couple of different assets that you guys could have had to get you into the top 1000. But now, as the game weeks have kind of gone on, we've kind of normalized to quite a high ownership template, and you can see that especially in the defense. I'm going to start off with the bench because, as I always say, the least important part of any kind of draft or team, a Foster in goal, no kind of disruption there, a high ownership for a goalkeeper that's quite cheap, managed to actually get an assist this game week at 12, so that just shows you that he is proving worth his while at a 4.1 or 4.2 million, however much he is, but still really cheap goalkeeper to go by, and definitely looks like he should be starting for Watford in the upcoming game weeks. We then have Duffy and Brownie, or just simply two budget enablers there from a defensive and a midfield point of view, and I think there should be some variation here, and that's why Duffy is only owned by 35%, because most kind of managers might switch around that fifth defender. As I said, they are quite budget, and therefore you can kind of chop and change them. Going on to the last bench player though, it's going to be Hwang, with quite a low ownership, only 27.6%. But I think out of those third forwards, and also according to the budget constraints, I think Hwang was going to be the highest owned kind of affordable player. But now going on to the starting 11, or at least the starting 11 of the template team in the top 1000 managers, and I wanted to show you guys this high-owned defense. So starting off with Ramsdale in goal with a massive 83.2% ownership in the top 1000 managers. I thought this might be a little bit different, but maybe this is just considering that Sanchez was out with that injury. But 83% for a goalkeeper is absolutely massive, and if you guys don't have some coverage on that to Arsenal clean sheet with a nice fixture coming up against Newcastle at home in Game Week 13, you might want to reconsider that. Maybe get some coverage if you guys don't own Ramsdale. But definitely a great keeper to go by. Unfortunately, he did concede 4 goals to Liverpool, but overall I thought that he had a relatively good performance, and if it wasn't thanks to Ramsdale, I think that game could have been 8 or 7-0 to be honest. We then have three defenders who all have above 90% ownership. It's going to be Cancelo, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then also Livramento. So the lowest owned out of those is going to be 93.9% Cancelo. I think that number will propel up throughout this week before Game Week 13 after a relatively good performance from the Man City fullback. Trent Alexander-Arnold yet again showing why he's proving such good value for money even at that expensive price point, just because his attacking threat is absolutely sensational. Livramento might be a little bit unlucky there, against Norwich, but Norwich should end up winning that game 2-1. I think most of you guys, if you did start him, were kind of expecting either a clean sheet or maybe some attacking returns, but no, it was unfortunately only the 1-point appearance for the relatively cheap Livramento, who I think currently is about 4.6 million. But the last player to go by is going to be James, and I don't really classify James as a low-owned player because I think any of those Chelsea defenders is going to be quite highly owned, and whether you own James or Chilwell, or maybe even both, I think both of these players are relatively highly owned in the top 1000 template. I think James currently just edging it due to him getting more points than Chilwell over these last 2 weeks, if memory serves me right, and that's why I think in the top 1000, James is the preferred option. But I think between these two assets, not much between them. I think the best scenario is to actually own both of them, because if you guys did watch the Chelsea game in game week 12, I think both these two assets could have had massive attacking returns. But 75% ownership is not shabby at all, and I think James is only going to kind of rise in this ownership throughout the upcoming game weeks. So we do have some more variation going into the midfield and then also the forward department, not kind of these 95% owned players. The only one that we do have is going to be Mo Salah there, who's owned by 999 teams within the top 1000. I think only one manager does not own Mo Salah at the current moment, which is absolutely sensational. I don't really know how he's getting those extra points. Maybe he has a relatively good defense and attack. But I think, as I always say, Mo Salah, the most essential player to own at the current moment, especially because most of us are actually just perma-captaining him after some really consistent returns over the last couple game weeks. Foden, our next highest midfielder that the top 1000 template does make use of. He's going to come in with a lovely 75.6% of ownership. Quite high, to be honest, considering the fact that Foden hasn't actually returned that much in these last couple game weeks. I think in the last 3 game weeks, he's returned about 5 or 6 points, which is not really what you want from the Man City forward. Did actually start out wide, not in that false 9 or 9 position like we've been accustomed to. And unfortunately, I do think that hinders Foden quite a bit, because I think an out-and-out striker or an out-of-position midfielder playing as a striker is definitely going to be better value for money at that price point. But Man City have some lovely fixtures coming up, maybe not in game week 13 against West Ham at home, but after that, great fixtures to be honest, so I would definitely hold on to Foden if you do still own him. Mbeumo at 61.2% owned, another player that unfortunately has not been getting the returns over these past couple game weeks, even though Brentford have had some great fixtures coming up, and unfortunately those fixtures do turn. But maybe this is one of those teams that play better against the better opposition, and maybe Mbeumo can finally not hit the post, and one of those shots can hopefully creep into the net. I think his ownership will slowly deteriorate, especially if the returns don't come in these upcoming games, because at that price point, there are some other options that are looking quite attractive. And the final midfielder to go by is going to be Rafinha, who comes in with slightly more than 50% ownership within the top 1000 managed. Now, he did not play in game week 12 due to some illness. Now, we don't exactly know how long he's going to be out for, but I do think if Rafinha does feature, he definitely could have got some points against Spurs, because that Spurs defense did not look great at all. And I think with the way that Leeds are currently playing and the way they're setting up, I do think the returns are going to be coming for Rafinha in the upcoming game weeks. And then finally, our 2 strikers, it's going to be Harry Kane and Antonio. Now, if you guys did watch the Game Week 12 team selection of the top 1000 managers, you would have noticed that Kane was absolutely nowhere, but now came into the template even though he did not score. So what that tells you is that the top 1000 managers did bring Harry Kane in last week, and they thought that he would absolutely bang against Leeds, but unfortunately it wasn't the case. But with 3 fixtures coming up on the horizon that look quite tasty, I'm expecting Harry Kane to hopefully turn over a new leaf and add to that 1 Premier League goal this season. So 63.4% of the top 1000 do own Harry Kane. I'm not expecting that number to grow, to be honest, after a relatively lackluster performance in game week 12. And the final forward to go by, his ownership has kind of stayed consistent, because I think most managers are holding on to him. It's going to be Antonio from West Ham. And even though Antonio has not been getting any returns, I think we might be slightly too far into these bad fixtures to get rid of him, because West Ham do have some nice fixtures coming up, but we might have to wait another 4 game weeks until Antonio manages to see that sea of green. So let me know in the comments down below, how many of the top 1000 template do you guys own? Are you guys looking at any differentials to bring in for game week 13, or maybe a player that you currently do own that's going to be a differential over these players? Because after all, if you own the template of the top 1000 managers, you won't be gaining on them every single game week. And after all, that's all we want to do in FPL. We want to climb those ranks, and maybe a differential or 2 could be quite handy. So now going on to the transfers for the upcoming game week, or at least the transfers that I'm predicting the top 1000 managers to make. It's going to be one of 2 options. The first option is going to be banking a transfer, and the second option is going to be maybe if these managers do already own 2 free transfers and they might have to burn one, because I do consider both of these 2 assets to be quite luxury transfers to get rid of, and it's going to be Antonio in that forward department or Mbeumo in that midfield department. Now, Mbeumo is a little bit easier to kind of upgrade, downgrade, because we do have players like a Gallagher from Crystal Palace Jimenez, who's racking up the FPL points over these last couple game weeks. And to be honest, the money isn't that much to upgrade Mbumo to Gallagher. So that might be an option that you guys are looking at. But in terms of Antonio, maybe as I said, we're kind of too far into these bad fixtures. And the time to transfer him out was probably 2 game weeks ago. And we might be a little bit stuck with him. So that's why I think this is kind of a luxury transfer to do, because West Ham do have some nice fixtures coming up in about 4 game weeks time. But maybe the top 1,000 managers want to get a little bit differential, want to go for a cheaper option, maybe upgrade another department. Maybe they don't own someone like a Harry Kane. They could always upgrade Antonio to a Harry Kane. But if you want to downgrade him, I mean, a Raul Jimenez, like with the Hwang, have great fixes coming up in the next 2. And he might be worth taking a punt on over Antonio, who plays Man City next. But to be honest, I think what the top 1,000 will do is probably bank a transfer so that next week they can do 2 free transfers and maybe switch the template around a little bit. And now finally going on to the top 1,000 team selection. This is the team that I'm expecting these managers to put out for game week 13. I'm going to start off with Ramsdale in goal and the defense in general. Great fixtures, to be honest. All home fixtures, which usually spells a couple of points. So Ramsdale against Newcastle, even though Newcastle have been quite free scoring, I do think that at home Arsenal defensively have been quite assured. And that's why I think that Ramsdale, at least he can get some save points here, but I am expecting some defensive returns as well for these Arsenal assets. Now going on to the back 3, the template back 3 of Cancelo, Trent and James. A great fixture, to be honest, even though James does face Manchester United, have not been at their best from an attacking point of view, and Chelsea's defense has been quite solid, so I'm expecting at least some defensive returns from James, and you might even be able to sneak an attacking one as well. But I think definitely the attacking returns will probably come from Cancelo and then also Trent, with them both carrying great form defensively and from an attacking point of view. I can honestly see some massive hauls this game week, considering that both of these fixtures are going to be played at the Etihad and at Anfield. West Ham and Southampton have been struggling attacking wise, so that's why I think there could be a clean sheet on the cards here, and I just hope that maybe Liverpool, even though they've been a little bit dodgy from a defensive point of view, against Southampton they might be quite secure. Our midfield department also has a couple of home fixtures. We have Salah against Southampton, who will definitely be the template captain to go for. Mbumo vs Everton, a side that although against Man City only conceded 3, I mean that's a sort of achievement for Everton, only conceding 3 there, but against Brentford, a side that might be better against these better opposition, they might be on the receiving end of conceding a few. And that's why Mbumo might still be a good option to hold on to, because it is a home fixture for Brentford, and hopefully they rebound from this bad form that they've had in the past couple game weeks. Foden against West Ham, not really expecting too much from him, even though West Ham did kind of lose their game against Wolves in game week 12. I still think they're quite a defensively assured side, and I'm just hoping that Foden maybe comes back from that knock for you managers that do own him. And the final player to go for, Rafinha, also a player that currently is out with illness, but I am expecting to be back for Brighton, and if they can kind of replicate what Aston Villa did, Rafinha could definitely be on the receiving end of some attacking returns. And finally, the forward department, I'm not expecting too much from Antonio. I'm actually benching him in my own personal side. We have Hwang versus Norwich, a great fixture to kind of have for those Wolves assets. Wolves are a side that don't necessarily score the most goals, but they're also getting some good stats. And I think that Hwang against Norwich could be a great little differential if you guys do own him. The final player though in the front line is going to be Harry Kane, a player that's kind of splitting the community a little bit here after a relatively dismal performance against Leeds on the weekend. But hopefully against Burnley, this is kind of a style that maybe is more suited to Harry Kane, and I just hope that he kind of repays us owners that brought him in from game week 12 onwards. But overall, the template looks really strong, and therefore I think it's going to be quite a high scoring affair. Let me know in the comments down below how your side kind of compares to this, as if your side's not looking too great compared to the template, you might be on the receiving end of a red arrow, unfortunately. But this is basically wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for the team selection and the ultimate guide coming up tomorrow and on Thursday. Otherwise, enjoy the Champions League and all the football that's happening this midweek. But I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.